The silence in the room was deafening as I stared at the cheap envelope in my hands. Inside was a $10 gift card to a coffee shop I didn't even like. My siblings, Mark, Elaine, and Thomas, exchanged smug glances across our father's lavish dining room. Dad hadn't noticed yet. He was still opening Thomas's extravagant gift, a limited edition watch worth more than my car. "It's all you're worth to us," Mark had whispered when he handed it to me, making sure Dad couldn't hear. "Just like your contribution to this family." I clutched the envelope tightly, my knuckles turning white as I forced a smile. 48 years old, and I was still the family punching bag. Dad looked up, his eyes briefly landing on the envelope in my hands before moving on without comment. He didn't even ask what they'd given me. The walls of Dad's mansion seemed to close in around me. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, Persian rugs covered marble floors, and museum-quality art adorned every wall. The trappings of an empire my father had built from nothing. Sullivan Enterprises was now worth over $2 billion, and at 80 years old, Dad had finally decided it was time to talk succession. That's why we were all here tonight, not just for his birthday, but because he'd promised an announcement about the future of the company. A company I'd given 23 years of my life to, working my way up from the mailroom to VP of operations, while my siblings took shortcuts through nepotism and charm. "Speech time," my father announced, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. His birthday dinner had been cleared, replaced by coffee and his favorite German chocolate cake. He stood slowly, his once imposing frame now slightly stooped with age, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "First, I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with me tonight." He smiled, looking at each of us in turn. "These birthday gatherings mean more to me each year." I nodded politely, though we all knew attendance wasn't optional. Dad ran his family like he ran his business, with unquestioned authority and clear consequences for disobedience. As you know, I've reached an age where succession planning isn't just prudent, it's necessary. He paused, and the air in the room grew thick with anticipation. My siblings straightened in their seats, eyes bright with ambition. Sullivan Enterprises has been my life's work, but it's time to think about its future leadership. Thomas, my youngest brother and Dad's clear favorite, couldn't contain a smirk. At 39, he'd been fast-tracked to Chief Marketing Officer after just 5 years with the company. His MBA from Harvard, paid for entirely by Dad, and his uncanny ability to take credit for others' work had served him well. "I've spent the last year evaluating each of you," Dad continued. "Your contributions, your vision, your leadership." I took a sip of water, trying to calm my nerves. Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped he'd recognize my work. I'd doubled the efficiency of our operations division, saved the company millions in logistics costs, and built a team that would walk through fire for me. But I'd done it quietly, without the self-promotion my siblings excelled at. "The board and I have made our decision," Dad said, his voice suddenly formal. "The new CEO of Sullivan Enterprises, effective on my retirement next month, will be—" My heart hammered against my ribs. For one wild moment, I imagined hearing my name. Thomas Sullivan. Exactly as expected. Thomas stood, accepting congratulatory handshakes from Mark and kisses on both cheeks from Elaine. No one looked at me. "Thank you, Dad," Thomas said with practiced humility. "I won't let you down." I took another sip of water, willing my face to remain neutral. I'd prepared for this moment, told myself it didn't matter, but the sting of rejection still burned. "However," Dad continued, "there's more to my announcement." Thomas paused in his moment of glory, looking confused. "Sullivan Enterprises has grown too large for any one person to manage alone, so I've decided to restructure our leadership." My father pulled a folder from beside his chair and opened it on the table. "Mark will remain as Chief Financial Officer, but with expanded responsibilities and a seat on the board." Mark nodded, clearly disappointed he hadn't gotten the top job but satisfied with his consolation prize. Elaine will transition from HR to become our new chief operating officer. I froze. That was my division, the one I'd built from the ground up. And Catherine, Dad finally looked at me, will be leaving the company. The room spun slightly. Leaving? I hadn't resigned. What was he talking about? I've arranged a generous severance package, he continued, as if he were discussing the weather. 3 months' salary and benefits through the end of the year. 3 months. After 23 years of service. My siblings didn't even try to hide their smirks now. Dad, I said, finding my voice at last. I don't understand. My division has the highest efficiency ratings in the company. Our employee satisfaction scores are unmatched. What? The decision is made, Catherine, he cut me off. Sullivan Enterprises needs fresh leadership, new perspectives. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. The same thing he said when he missed my college graduation for a business meeting. When he forgot to call on my birthday 5 years running. When he dismissed my husband from family gatherings after our divorce, even though he'd been part of the family for 15 years. When would you like me to leave? I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Security will accompany you to clear out your office tomorrow morning. Security, like I was a threat, like I hadn't dedicated my adult life to his company. I see. I carefully placed my napkin on the table and stood. Then I think I'll go home now. Catherine, Dad frowned, don't be dramatic. We haven't had dessert. I've lost my appetite. I picked up my purse and the pathetic gift card my siblings had chosen to symbolize my worth to them. Happy birthday, Dad. No one tried to stop me as I walked out. No one followed me to the door. I made it all the way to my car before the tears started falling. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets of the city I'd grown up in. My modest house was dark when I arrived, no one waiting for me, no one to share my humiliation with. Just silence and the echo of my father's words, Catherine will be leaving the company. Inside, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my sofa, still in my expensive black dress, the one I'd bought specially for tonight, hoping against hope that this time would be different. This time Dad would see me. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Linda. How'd it go? She asked. I stared at the screen, unsure how to even begin explaining. How do you tell someone that your entire professional identity had just been erased, that your family had publicly deemed you worthless? Instead of responding, I set the phone down and walked to my home office. Unlike my siblings, who had used Dad's money to buy mansions and vacation homes, I'd lived frugally. My one indulgence was this room, a beautiful space with built-in bookshelves, a hand-knotted rug, and a desk that had once belonged to my grandmother. I sat down and opened my laptop, then pulled up a folder labeled Plan B. I'd started it 5 years ago after Thomas had taken credit for my logistics overhaul and received a promotion while I got a standard annual review. The folder contained business plans, market analyses, lists of potential clients, everything I would need to start my own consulting firm. I'd never had the courage to use it. The Sullivan name opened doors in this town, and going out on my own meant losing that advantage. But now the decision had been made for me. As I scrolled through the documents, a new email notification appeared. From my father's private account, sent 10 minutes ago. The subject line, tomorrow's announcement. I hesitated before opening it. What more could he possibly have to say? Board members and senior leadership, it began. Not even addressed to me personally, just a company-wide announcement I'd been copied on. As you know, tomorrow I will be announcing the new leadership structure for Sullivan Enterprises, effective upon my retirement next month. While most of you are aware that Thomas will be stepping into the CEO role, there are additional changes that may come as a surprise. I scrolled down, scanning quickly. Restructuring, streamlining operations, integration of departments. Then I saw it, buried in the third paragraph. The operations division will be disbanded, with key functions absorbed by other departments. This restructuring will eliminate approximately 150 positions, though critical personnel will be reassigned. My heart stopped. My team, my people, 150 loyal employees who had trusted me, followed my leadership, helped build the most efficient division in the company. They weren't just being handed to a lane, they were being fired. I kept reading, horror mounting with each word. Catherine Sullivan has agreed to take early retirement, a complete lie, and has been instrumental in identifying redundancies within her division. Another lie. I'd done no such thing. Separation packages will be minimal as this restructuring falls under our business necessity clause in employment contracts. Minimal. Not even the 3 months he was giving me. The final paragraph was the worst. This information is confidential until tomorrow's announcement. Anyone breaking this confidence will face immediate termination and potential legal action. He'd silenced me. If I warned my team tonight, tried to give them even a few hours heads up to prepare, I'd lose my severance and possibly face a lawsuit. I closed the laptop slowly, hands shaking with fury. This wasn't just about pushing me out. This was destruction of my career, my reputation, and the livelihoods of people who trusted me. All so Thomas could start with a clean slate and a fatter bottom line. The $10 gift card still sat in my purse. It's all you're worth to us, Mark had said. But it wasn't just me they were valuing at nothing. It was everyone I'd worked with, everyone who'd helped build Dad's precious company. I opened my phone and pulled up Linda's text again. Linda wasn't just my best friend. She was also a partner at the city's most prestigious employment law firm. Need to talk, I typed. Now, it's an emergency. She responded immediately, coming over. 15 minutes. As I waited for her, I returned to my office and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, evidence of wrongful termination and corporate malfeasance at Sullivan Enterprises. For the first time since leaving my father's birthday party, I smiled. They thought I was just going to disappear quietly. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Catherine Sullivan wasn't going anywhere without a fight, and I had a feeling they were about to discover exactly what I was worth. Linda arrived with her usual efficiency, still dressed in her work clothes and carrying her laptop bag. The moment she saw my face, her professional demeanor softened. "Oh, Kath," she said, pulling me into a hug. "That bad?" "Worse," I replied, leading her to my kitchen. I poured us both a glass of wine while explaining the night's events, the gift card, the public humiliation, the email revealing tomorrow's mass layoffs. Linda listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each new detail. When I finished, she set down her wine glass and opened her laptop. "Forward me that email," she said, her voice shifting to what I called her lawyer tone. "And any others that might be relevant." I did as she asked, then watched as she read through the message, occasionally muttering under her breath. "This is—" She paused, searching for the right word, "extraordinary, and not in a good way." "Can they do this?" I asked. "Fire you?" "Yes, unfortunately. You're an at-will employee, even as a VP. But the way they're doing it, lying about your involvement, claiming you approved the layoffs, preventing you from warning your team, that crosses several lines." She typed rapidly, making notes. "And that ridiculous severance for someone at your level after 23 years? That alone raises red flags. What about my team?" That's where this gets interesting. Linda looked up from her screen. "Have you ever heard of the WARN Act?" I shook my head. Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. Federal law requires 60 days notice before mass layoffs. Based on what you've told me about the size of your division and the company, Sullivan Enterprises is absolutely covered by this law. A small flicker of hope ignited in my chest. So they can't just fire everyone tomorrow? Not legally, no. But companies try to skirt this all the time. usually by claiming unforeseeable business circumstances or a natural disaster. Neither applies here. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the keyboard. What's more concerning is your father's threat of legal action against anyone who breaks confidence. That could be interpreted as an attempt to prevent employees from exercising their legal rights. She turned the laptop toward me, showing a legal statute. This is whistleblower protection law. If you report illegal activity like violating the WARN Act, you're protected from retaliation. Even though the layoffs haven't happened yet, the plan to violate the law is itself problematic. Your father's email is evidence of intent. For the first time since reading that awful email, I felt something other than despair. So, what do we do? Linda closed her laptop with a decisive click. Tonight, we document everything and prepare. Tomorrow morning, you go to that meeting as planned, but you don't go alone. The next morning, I dressed with particular care, a charcoal suit that I knew commanded respect, my grandmother's pearls, and heels that put me eye to eye with most men in the office. I arrived at Sullivan Enterprises 30 minutes before the all-hands meeting where my father would announce the restructuring. As promised, Linda was waiting in the parking lot with 2 colleagues from her firm. We'd been up most of the night, preparing documents and strategy. I felt exhausted, but strangely calm. "Remember," Linda said as we walked toward the building, "say nothing until the announcement is made. We need them to show their hand first." Security was waiting at my office as my father had promised, but they seemed confused by the presence of 3 attorneys. One guard made a phone call, and minutes later, Thomas appeared, his usual smug expression faltering slightly. "Catherine," he said, pointedly ignoring my companions, "Dad mentioned you might be difficult about this. The meeting's not for another half-hour. I'm aware of the schedule, Thomas. I've worked here longer than you have." His eyes narrowed. "What's with the entourage?" "This is Linda Chin, my attorney. I didn't introduce the others. Let him wonder." "Attorney!" Thomas laughed, but it sounded forced. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? This is a standard corporate restructuring." "Is it?" I held his gaze steadily. "We'll see what the Department of Labor has to say about that." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" "I'll be at the meeting, Thomas, as will my attorneys. I suggest you let Dad know." He stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked quickly toward the executive suite. I allowed myself a small smile. "Round 1 to us," Linda murmured. For the next 20 minutes, I cleaned out my personal items while security watched uncomfortably. Photographs, a few books, my spare shoes, the detritus of 23 years of work life fit into a single box. It was both sad and liberating. At 5 minutes to 9, my phone rang. Dad's private number. "Yes," I answered, putting the call on speaker so Linda could hear. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My father's voice was tight with anger. "Thomas says you've brought lawyers to my company." "Your company, Dad. That's always been the problem, hasn't it? Never our company, never my career. Just your kingdom to do with as you please. You're making a scene over nothing. This restructuring is a business decision. A business decision to violate federal labor laws? To lie to the board about my involvement? To put 150 people out of work without proper notice?" There was a long pause. "Who told you about the board communication?" "You did, Dad. You copied me on the email." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him recalculating. "Catherine, be reasonable. Come to my office, alone, and we can discuss this like family." "No, Dad. We'll discuss it in the meeting, in front of everyone. In front of my team, the people you plan to blindside today." "This is a mistake," he warned, his voice low. "Don't throw away your future over some misplaced loyalty to employees who won't remember your name in a month." "My future at Sullivan Enterprises ended last night," I replied calmly. "You made sure of that. I'm just making sure everyone gets what they're legally entitled to. I ended the call before he could respond. The main conference room was already full when we arrived. Every member of my team was there, looking confused and anxious. Mark and Elaine sat near the head of the table, whispering urgently. Thomas stood by the door, arms crossed defensively. And my father, my imposing, intimidating father, looked suddenly older than his 80 years. A ripple of surprise went through the room when I entered with my attorneys. Several of my team members started to approach me with questions, but I shook my head slightly. Not yet. Since we're all here, my father said with forced cheer, let's begin. He launched into his prepared speech about his retirement, about the future of Sullivan Enterprises, about Thomas taking the helm. It was word for word what he'd said at his birthday dinner, practiced and polished. Then came the part about restructuring, as he explained how the operations division would be streamlined and integrated into other departments. Angry murmurs began to rise from my team. He forged ahead, claiming this was a joint decision made with my full support. That was when I stood up. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dad, but that's simply not true. The room fell silent. I was informed of my termination and this restructuring less than 12 hours ago at your birthday dinner. I had no input into this decision, and I certainly don't support it. My father's face reddened. Catherine, this is hardly the time. It's exactly the time, I cut him off. Before you continue, I think everyone here should know that this restructuring involves the immediate termination of approximately 150 employees, without proper notice as required by federal law. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. My team members looked from me to my father in shock. Furthermore, I continued, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the growing commotion, the email sent to the board last night falsely claimed that I had identified redundancies in my division and approved these terminations. That's enough, my father thundered, slamming his hand on the table. The room quieted, but the damage was done. Everyone was looking at him now, not with the usual respect and fear, but with dawning understanding. Linda stood beside me. Mr. Sullivan, I'm Linda Chin, representing Catherine and potentially the affected employees of the Operations Division. I'd like to draw your attention to the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, which requires 60 days' notice before mass layoffs of this scale. She laid a document on the table. This is a formal notification of potential legal action if the planned terminations proceed as described in your email of last night. My father's face had gone from red to purple. This is outrageous. You can't come into my company and... Actually, we can, Linda replied calmly, particularly since we have evidence that suggests you were aware of these legal requirements and deliberately attempted to circumvent them. Thomas stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Everyone, please. There's obviously been a miscommunication. Let's take a short break and... No break, I said firmly. My team deserves to know what was planned for today, and they deserve to know the truth. I turned to face my colleagues directly. The plan was to disband our entire division with immediate effect. You would have been escorted out today with minimal severance, despite years of loyal service and record-breaking performance. The room erupted again, this time with open anger. Voices overlapped as people demanded explanations, assurances, details. Amidst the chaos, Mark approached me. What do you want? He hissed. Money? A different position? Name it, and let's end this circus. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and felt a strange pity. I want what I've always wanted, Mark. Respect, fairness, decency, things you've never understood the value of. Before he could reply, my father's voice cut through the noise. Enough! The room quieted again. My father looked around at the faces watching him. Angry, disappointed, betrayed, then back at me. Catherine, he said, his voice suddenly tired. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? It was the first real question he'd asked me in years. Not an accusation or a demand, but an actual question. Justice, I answered simply. For my team and for myself. For a long moment, he just looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Then he sighed heavily. Everyone except the Sullivan family and Ms. Chin, please step outside. We'll reconvene shortly. People hesitated, looking to me for guidance. I nodded reassuringly. It's okay. We'll fix this. Once the room had cleared, my father collapsed into his chair. You've made your point, Catherine. Spectacularly. This isn't about making a point, Dad. This is about doing the right thing. The right thing for whom? The company needs to cut costs. Your division. My division has the highest efficiency ratings in the company, I said, anger finally seeping into my voice. We've reduced operational costs by 22% while increasing output. The problem isn't my division. It's your favoritism and this family's dysfunction. Thomas scoffed. Always the victim, aren't you, Kath? No, Thomas. Always the scapegoat. There's a difference. Linda cleared her throat. If I may suggest a path forward, one that avoids protracted legal battles and public relations damage. My father waved a hand tiredly. Go ahead. First, no immediate terminations. Any restructuring must comply with WARN Act requirements, including 60 days' notice and continuation of benefits. 60 days of paying employees to do nothing? That's insane, Mark objected. Second, Linda continued as if he hadn't spoken, Catherine receives appropriate severance commensurate with her position and years of service. We suggest 1 month's salary for each year of employment, plus the cash value of unvested stock options. Thomas whistled. That's over $2 million. Third, Linda pressed on, a public retraction of the false statements made about Catherine's involvement in this decision, both to the board and to the employees. Absolutely not, my father snapped. I won't humiliate myself or this company. Dad, I said quietly, you were going to humiliate me. You were going to let everyone believe I'd betrayed my own team. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was unfortunate wording in the email. It was a lie, I said. One of many where I'm concerned. My father rubbed his temples, thinking. Finally, he looked up. Here's what I'll offer. Full compliance with the WARN Act. Appropriate severance for Catherine, we can negotiate the exact terms. No public retraction, but a clarification that the restructuring decision was made at the executive level. Linda looked at me questioningly. This was my call. And my team? I asked, after the 60 days? That depends, my father said. If they want to stay, we'll find places for them. But I won't guarantee everyone keeps their jobs indefinitely. It wasn't perfect, but it was far better than what had been planned. My team would have time to prepare, to find new positions if necessary, and I would walk away with the financial security to start over. One more thing, I said, meeting my father's eyes steadily. I want Thomas to personally tell my team the truth, that this was his decision, not mine, that their performance has been exemplary. Thomas started to protest, but my father held up a hand. Done. We hammered out the details over the next hour. By the time we called everyone back into the conference room, we had a new plan, one that respected the law and the people who had built this company. Thomas, looking like he'd swallowed something bitter, stood before my team and admitted the truth. He stumbled over the words, clearly unused to taking responsibility, but he did it. I watched the faces of my colleagues as they realized they weren't being fired today, that they had time to plan, that I hadn't betrayed them. When the meeting finally ended, people lingered, coming up to thank me, to express their shock, to ask what I would do next. I answered as best I could, still processing the day's events myself. My father approached as the room emptied. For a moment, we stood in awkward silence, 40 years of complicated history between us. I underestimated you, he said finally. I've been doing that your whole life, it seems. Yes, I agreed. You have. What will you do now? I thought about the Plan B folder on my computer, about the skills I'd developed, about the network I'd built. I'm going to start my own consulting firm. Operations management, efficiency systems, the things I'm good at. He nodded slowly. You'll do well. I know. Another pause. Catherine. He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I'm not good at saying I was wrong. No, you're not. But I was wrong about you, wrong about a lot of things. It wasn't quite an apology, but for my father it was monumental. Thank you for saying that. As we walked out of the conference room, he asked, Will you still come to Sunday dinners? The question surprised me. Sunday dinners had always been mandatory, not a choice. Do you want me to? Yes, he said, with unexpected sincerity. I'd like that. Then I'll think about it. In the lobby, Linda was waiting. Ready to go? She asked. I looked around the building that had been my second home for 23 years. My name would be removed from the doors soon, my office reassigned, my routine disrupted. But for the first time in decades, I felt light, unburdened. Yes, I said. I'm ready. 6 months later, Sullivan Operations Consulting had 16 clients and a growing reputation for excellence. I'd hired 4 people from my old team who decided not to stay at Sullivan Enterprises after their 60 days, including my brilliant assistant, May, who now ran our office with terrifying efficiency. I still went to Sunday dinners, though now it was by choice, not obligation. Things weren't perfect with my family. Decades of patterns couldn't be undone in months, but they were different. Mark was still Mark, but Elaine had surprised me by reaching out, by making a genuine effort to repair our relationship. And my father was trying in his way. As for Thomas, he'd been humbled by the experience. Taking over as CEO while managing the fallout from almost violating federal labor laws had been a baptism by fire. He still had a lot to learn about true leadership, but there were moments when I saw potential in him that I'd never noticed before. The $10 gift card still sat in my desk drawer. I kept it as a reminder, not of what my siblings thought I was worth, but of what I'd proven myself to be worth. My own company, my own path, my own definition of success. One evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Catherine Sullivan, I answered. Ms. Sullivan, this is Janelle Washington, CEO of Meridian Global, one of the largest corporations in the country. I've been hearing impressive things about your consulting work. Thank you, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. That's kind of you to say. Not kind, accurate. Your reputation for integrity is as strong as your reputation for results. That's rare in this business. I thought about that day in the conference room, about standing up not just for myself, but for my team. Integrity matters to me. It matters to me too, she replied, which is why I'd like to discuss bringing you on as a consultant for our international operations division. It's a significant project, 2 years minimum with a budget to match. The opportunity was enormous, far beyond anything I'd dared hope for so soon. I'd be very interested in discussing that. Excellent. My assistant will set up a meeting. She paused. And Catherine, I should mention that we were also considering Sullivan Enterprises for this contract. But after hearing how you handled that situation 6 months ago, well, let's just say we value leaders who do the right thing, even when it's difficult. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring at the phone in amazement. The right thing, the difficult thing, the thing I'd finally found the courage to do. On impulse, I opened my drawer and took out the $10 gift card. With a smile, I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. I didn't need that reminder anymore. I knew exactly what I was worth.